On today's episode of Locked On Wild, which young players have the biggest shoes to fill for the 2025-2026 season?
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked On Wild.
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team each and every day, and we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we're taking a look at the 5 main young players that could have a big impact on the Wild roster this year. Who's under the most pressure? Where do we feel like players will slot into the lineup? And who could have the biggest impact this upcoming season? My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, host of Seth on Sports, credentialed media member, and joined, as always, by Alex Micheletti on a Monday edition of the show. Alex, we are firing up for an afternoon episode here. We had Rib Fest here in Mankato this past weekend, and it was a blast. Ate as many ribs as you could possibly imagine. And now we're getting closer to the start of training camp. About 6 weeks out from that, and about 10 weeks out from the start of the regular season. So it's getting close, which means young players could step into the spotlight and fill big roles for this Minnesota Wild team. We're going to focus on the main 5 for this episode. Jesper Wallstedt, Danila, Yurov, Liam Öhgren, Zeev, Buium, and David Jiricek are the main 5 that we're going to talk about. Obviously, if things go kitty wampus this year, there could be more players that factor in. There could be players in camp that maybe make a little more noise than we are anticipating. But those are kind of the main 5 that we're rolling with here today. And I thought it would be a great spot to start to just kind of look at where we expect these players to fit into the lineup. Now, in just looking at what the Daily Faceoff has for the current line combinations, I know ultimately we would all love to see a player like Danila, Yurov hit that top 6 running right off the bat. But assuming that Marco Rossi stays with the team, which we're operating under that pretense until noted otherwise. As great as it would be for him to just hop right into the top 6, I actually kind of dig what they have for a line combination right now of Liam Öhgren, Danila, Yurov, and Ryan Hartman on line 3. We knew when Vladimir Tarasenko was acquired that he was going to be the first option in that top 6 role. This, I think, allows Danila, Yurov a little opportunity to get acclimated without having to immediately be put in the meat grinder. Same thing for Liam Öhgren. It's not as big of a pressure role, but that's with the caveat that the guys in front of them actually produce. So I guess I'm going to say right off the bat, I don't mind that as a third line at all.
Yeah, they have little to no experience in the NHL, so you have to put them, especially with the center depth and the strength of the forwards in the Western Conference. It just beasts out there, and they have to get used to Yurov is coming over from Russia, and it's a completely different game and compared to North America. And Öhgren doesn't have a whole lot of experience. He's played some NHL games, but he hasn't gone through the full 82 gauntlet. It's the hardest league in the world, and so they really just need to get those reps in, and they'll find out early. It's put up or shut up, right?
Yeah, it definitely is going to be. And on the Öhgren route, he got put on the Rossi plan last year. He played in a handful of games at the NHL level, but just didn't. It was a combination of being in kind of a weird spot in the lineup, but also I'm going to say this because this is definitely a factor. Also, him not really looking the part. And this was the exact same thing that Rossi went through, and just not really looking and having that that whole game that you need to have at the NHL level. And he has put in the time. We've seen the photos. He's put in the time all off season. So putting him on that third line to start, giving him the opportunity to really kind of work into that spot. If he plays better than that, and either Vladimir Tarasenko or Matt Zuccarello struggle, hey, guess what? You can bump him into the lineup, but I want to try to avoid what has happened in some of these other instances, like with Rossi, where he's thrust into a role immediately and can't really fill it. Like what happened with Öhgren last year, where he plays a handful of games but then gets sent down. As much as we want to see these players all go the Matt Boldy route or the Brock Faber route, there's a learning curve. So if you can eliminate the curve as much as possible, get them comfortable, and then give them the opportunity to take the plane off the runway, I think that's the perfect scenario.
Yeah, because if Öhgren gets buried back down in Iowa, you don't think you would probably see him again, or he'd maybe ask for a trade. And Yurov is only coming over here to play in the NHL. So if he doesn't make the team, then does he go back to the KHL, which would be kind of a nightmare scenario for the Wild. So you definitely have to give him a chance to try to serve. You don't want him to sink right away. And so putting him in less pressure role, going up against easier matchups, maybe getting the the third pair defenseman out there compared to first line defense, and just let them learn and grow from that role.
Yeah, and it's all about mismatches. And best case scenario for this team is you get everybody hot at the same time, and you're like, well, now we just have a bunch of lines that are capable of attacking.
Like a few years ago, remember that when we had lines all
2022, the ultimate season as far as goals go. What could have been if not for Jordan Binnington? Anyway, defensively, some interesting possibilities for the Wild. We know that Jonas Brodin's going to be out of the lineup to start. It seems like whether Brodin was in or out, Zeev Buium is going to make the top six to start. The interesting part of this is, at least according to Daily Faceoff, they have Carson Lambos in over David Jiricek right now, with Zach Bogosian also in the lineup. And so I'm going to say, Buium, I feel like, is in, and we're going to have objectives for all these different young players. I think the objective for Zeev is to have him, by the time the season is done, have him comfortable in the top four. As a 20-year-old, I think that would be reasonable. Have him comfortable playing a top four role on a pretty dang good NHL defense. I think for David Jiricek, my goal for him this year would be to see him in the lineup regularly as quickly as you can, because you gave up a ton to get him. And if he just continues to kind of stew down in Iowa, that is starting to look like a dicey trade. Now, I know he had a lot to work on from the skating side of things, and it was a weird year with him being in Columbus, then being sent down, coming to Minnesota, playing in the NHL lineup, then being sent down, and then getting hurt the rest of the year. So there was a lot going on. But ideally, maybe you see Jiricek and Lambos both in the lineup, and then whichever one of them is playing the best, then the other gets pulled when Brodin's ready to return.
Yeah, possibly. I think we would think that Lambos would, if he was ready, he would have already been on the team, and so
yeah,
and you can't have Jiricek just sitting either.
No.
That does not help his development at all. He's already had development issues, like you mentioned, and now this is his, he's on his second organization, and so you really need him to play, through the, if there's mistakes, you at least have to get him that experience and, not just be stuck in Iowa. And I get that with Lambos too, but I think Jiricek should be given more of a leash than Lambos, because of the assets given up for him. And then if he falters, then you have Lambos as the insurance policy to play over him. But you can't, because if he flames out, that looks so bad for giving up the amount of draft capital that this team absolutely needs to develop the next wave of prospects, and to just have this one fall flat on your face would not be good for Bill Guerin.
No, it would not be. I mean, you traded Damon Hunt and 4 picks for David Jiricek and a 5th-round pick. So you didn't trade for him to be the 7th defenseman. You traded for him to play. So
right, his pro scouts, they told him that this guy was worth it. So that's putting a lot of faith into that scouting staff, and hopefully with the skating coaching that he's here for, that can help do wonders for a big guy like that.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, when he did play, he looked fine. Like
that Colorado game, he was fantastic against a great opponent.
So it at the end of the day, getting him and Buium regular time in the lineup by the end of the year is kind of what I'm shooting for. I think like I said for Zeev, get him comfortable being a top 4 defenseman by the end of the season, and he'll be well ahead of the curve as a 20-year-old, like way ahead of the curve as a 20-year-old. So those are, and for Lambos, I would imagine he'll be a call-up injury-wise if the Wild have additional defensive injuries. As far as Jesper goes, and we'll talk more about Jesper after the break, but as far as Jesper goes, his directive this year is clear. Beat out Cal Petersen. At the same time, beat out Cal Petersen. So we'll talk about which young players potentially are under the most pressure this season for the Minnesota Wild. That is on the way as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. No more multiple apps, no more credit card apps, finance apps, investment apps. Monarch Money puts it all in one place. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We are your team each and every day as well, and we continue the march to 3,600 subscribers on YouTube. We're already a fifth of the way there, so keep it going, and we'll continue to keep you up to date until the season starts in October. We are going with kind of a new season approach. Coming September 1st, we're going to be running a full boot camp for you all month long with player expectations, divisional previews, a look at the entire Western Conference. So it's going to be a full boot camp come September 1st. So make sure to keep an eye out right here at Locked On Wild. We talked about Jesper Wallstedt before the break, and I teed it up as best I could, beat out Cal Petersen for the number 2 goalie spot. But is Jesper the Wild player that is under the most pressure at this point? Not only because, and as far as young players go, not only because you had Marc-Andre Fleury, who had filled in as the backup for the last couple of seasons and now has retired, but also the fact that you've got Philip Gustafsson in the final year of his deal. We've talked, everydayers know my stance on whether or not Gus should be extended. We've talked about that over the course of the offseason. So not only pressure on him to perform, but also pressure for the Minnesota Wild to see what is waiting in the wings should they decide that maybe they don't want to extend Philip Gustafsson, which would I think would be a very bad idea.
Yeah, for Jesper, ideally you want him to play at least right around 30 games. You don't want Gus wearing out. Especially if they are planning on being a playoff team. I just don't think Gus can handle that 60, 65 game workload and then be the main guy in the playoffs for the entire stretch run. If they happen to win a playoff series and go deeper into the playoffs, which is the ultimate goal. And so Jesper has the most pressure probably on the team because you're, as the backup goalie, you're relied upon, especially those back to back. You're usually the second person on the back to back, and as we know, the Wild have a ton of back to backs. So, if they lose that first one, and you don't want to lose back to back on those, and so it's a lot of pressure for the backup goalie to perform, and he's coming off a just horrendous Iowa season. I know it's not all his fault, but there has to be a major improvement. And his main competition is a guy in Cal Petersen who has played in the NHL but hasn't in quite a bit, and really struggled, and is lucky to even get the opportunity to have a chance to maybe get in some NHL games if Jesper struggles.
Yeah, I think Petersen was the pick because he has veteran experience, but if he pushes Jesper for the backup job
There's big
even a
problems.
little bit, yeah, there are big problems for sure. So
they drafted Jesper in the first round, so that would be another. They can't swing and miss on both him and Jiricek.
Yeah, I agree. And Petersen's a guy too who he's not going to super push Samuel Levi for starts in Iowa, which is another guy that I think you want to get a bunch of starts down there too. So potential win-win.
Right.
Another player, Alex, that I think is going to be under a little bit of pressure here, but he's also going to factor into segment 3 as well. Danila Yurov is another guy who I think has the potential to fill a couple of different needed spots for this Minnesota Wild team long term, which is why he falls under the pressure as well. It being a top 6 center, and B, a top 6 playmaker in general. Joel Eriksson Ek has filled a top 6 center role admirably, but I think if you really look at a team like Florida or some of those other top-end teams, he is probably a 2B center or a third-line center for those teams. Because you got to have just horses at the top of the lineup, and if you don't, you get routinely run over. So Yurov, he could potentially fill 2 big needs on this team if he performs well, and he's got borderline top line potential too.
And unlike Marco Rossi, where the knock is size, you don't hear that ever on Danilo Yurov, right? So that could give Wild fans some relief, and just know that it's not the same type of situation. And there's definitely going to be some hiccups. He has to get used to a completely different league and the pace, and a lot more physicality in the NHL here, and he has to. He's be living in in North America for in Minnesota get used to that, and it's a good thing he has Tarasenko and Kaprizov to help him with the growing pains, and there's a ton of pressure on him because this team has really struggled, as we know, to develop centers and to have long careers in the NHL. And I know he doesn't play the same position, but him and Öhgren are always going to be forever linked to Jimmy Snuggerud and how Jimmy's kind of taken off with the Blues, and it's a division rival, and so they both of those guys have pressure to to perform hopefully like Jimmy Snuggerud has so far in the NHL.
Yeah, and if they could turn into a player like that, boy, oh
Right.
boy.
And it just helps. They need their young guys to perform well.
Mhm.
You see it in every sport. The young guys, they aren't making as much money as some of the high ticket guys, and Kaprizov is about to sign hopefully a long-term extension, and so you're going to need the cheaper guys to help with the depth scoring before they start to cash in their contracts.
According to some outlets, it could be any day now. I'm not touching that one. We're going to finish today's show by taking a look at which players could potentially result in the biggest swing. We're talking the home run hits. Who could give the Wild the biggest boost this season with a strong year? That's on the way as we finish today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Once again, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We are also your team each and every day as well. And I'm going to put this out here. We haven't done one of these in a long time. I feel like I probably should do at least one. We're going to dust off the mailbag here for next week. So I'm going to put a post up on the YouTube community tab. If you have any questions that you would like answered, get them in, and we'll do that for Tuesday of next week. A little mailbag action for you here on Locked On Wild. Okay, Alex. Of these players, Yurov, Öhgren, Jesper, Zeev, Buium, and David Jiricek, who has the potential to be the biggest home run? Like, if considering where we are expecting them to play in the lineup, if they have a good season at their position, who makes the biggest impact of that group of five?
I think Zeev, no question, just because if he gets those top power play minutes, his production is gonna skyrocket because he'll get to play with Boldy and Kaprizov, Zuccarello, so he could really put up some points. And as we've seen with the Calder, and same thing with the Norris, it comes down to points, which a lot of times it's not fair, but if he's going to be given that type of role that that a lot of people envision, fans want him to have that spot, and he's going to be given I think the most opportunity to thrive right away.
I like that, and let's not overlook the fact that there is something that we're definitely need to be starting to think about going forward, is trying to take and more evenly allocate the minute distribution on defense.
Right.
Like,
right.
You can't be asking Brock Faber to play 30 minutes a night.
He looked worn out at the end of last year. Yeah.
Yeah. You can't be asking him to do that. And we're getting to the point where you can't really expect Jared Spurgeon and Jonas Brodin to play over 70 games a season. So if Zeev can come in and he can give you, 65, 75 games, and by the end of the year he looks the part, that's going to go so far, because we've seen it with this power play. Like, you have all the talent in the world, and they just cannot consistently score. And if they can find somebody on top that can move that thing around and can keep it flowing, that's going to turn that into a whole new beast, and that's going to get everybody else unlocked. So I like Zeev. That's a great pick. However, I think I'm going to go with Danila Yurov. I just think he brings potential for a playmaker. You have 2 question marks in the top 6. Matt Zuccarello has been a good point producer over the last 5-6 years of his Wild tenure. He's also getting very long in the tooth, and his production is it's not going to last forever. So it behooves the Minnesota Wild. There's your word of the day, behooves. It behooves the Minnesota Wild to try to start figuring out who is going to fill that spot when Zuccarello is gone. Whether it be Matt Boldy slotting up to the top line, okay, that would be fine. But then who's going to anchor the second line? If you can get Danila Yurov to just look like a top 6, like an impact playmaker, then Bill Guerin can say he could play either one. He could play top line. He could play second line. Vladimir Tarasenko is another question mark. I do think he's going to have a better year than he did in Detroit, but it's also not a certainty. It's not a guarantee that he does, because he also is, he's going to be 33, 34 years old when the season starts.
And the drop off was, some guys it's earlier than Zuccarello's age, and we saw that with Gus Nyquist, where it just completely he fell off the map, and Tarasenko's had a major shoulder injury, so I agree. That's it goes back to earlier in the episode where you need your younger, cheaper guys to step up. So Yurov is definitely a great pick.
Yeah, and there's the looming pressure that we all know is there, that sometimes we talk about it, sometimes we choose to just give it kind of that acknowledgement without saying anything. This is going to be the group of players that has a massive impact as to whether or not Kirill Kaprizov signs for 4 or signs for 8. And if Danila Yurov all of a sudden looks like a top 6 guy, if Zeev Buium looks like a top 4, top pairing defenseman, he's going to look at that and he's going to say, okay, these guys are this good right now. Once they start to hit their peaks, it's going to be a problem. So there's plenty at stake for the youngest members of this Minnesota Wild roster that will be hopefully getting good cracks at making the team this season. And it's not going to be just those 5, because it turns out, and I've done thoughtful research on this. I've scoured the earth. It turns out you're not going to get through a full NHL season with just 23 players. It's not going to happen.
Oh, look at how many years in a row has this happened with the Wild? The Travis Boyds of the world, Devin Shores, Kuhari, you name it. Just randomness of guys getting the call up for the Wild.
I'm going to just see if I can do this, and if it of course it's not labeled. I was hoping that the full roster of players that were used last season, I was hoping it would be numbered so that I could say, here's how many players actually played with the Minnesota Wild this year. Actually, I guess. Oh, okay.
And
never mind. I did find what I was looking for.
The random defenseman that played in that Vancouver game. If you're looking at just remember, there was just like, yep. Who is this guy? Yeah.
All told, 36 players, 36 forwards and defensemen and goalies played with the Minnesota Wild last year. Now, what was it in 2023, 2024 when everything went absolutely pear-shaped? It was also 36. So you're talking 13 additional players over your full 23-man roster.
I had to think who it was. Crotty, remember? I was like,
yeah,
who is
Cameron Crotty?
Well, what is he doing in the lineup? That was, to thrust him in, that was insane.
The Minnesota Wild have been shockingly consistent as far as the number of players that actually play for them during the course of a season. If you go back to 2022, 2023, it was 37, including one game each for Nick Swaney and Damian Giroux. If you can remember those days.
Not related to Claude.
Yeah, no, this is not the Giroux that you're looking for. And then 2021, 2022, they also had 37, including one game from John Lazat.
St. Cloud Husky.
Yeah, there we go. So basically what we're saying in today's episode, to summarize, is there is going to be a lot of pressure on the vets on the roster, the top end guys that you would expect to carry the load. But there may be more pressure on the youngsters that are waiting in the wings to fill in at key spots. Because if they can really elevate this team and kind of take the next step, they can lead this Minnesota Wild team to a level that we're all hoping they get to eventually. It's just a matter of plugging and playing everything in at the same time. So we will, of course, keep an eye on everything Minnesota Wild related. Let us know in the comments if there is a particular young player you think is under the most pressure this year, or that you're most excited to see this year. Just drop it in the comments and let us know kind of where you are at after today's episode. But that's all we got for you for today. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. We've got you covered even through the off season with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.